Look everyone, it's Harudin, but wait, what's that he's hiding there? Look closer, because it's actually Harudin, a mysterious man hailing from the birth cave of an even more mysterious and foreign giant. And whilst no Elbaphian giant that we know of possesses the will of D, there is at least one whole family of non-Elbaphian giants in the world who do. So we're going to go over Harudin's connection to this family, which I affectionately refer to as Uncle Sol, as well as Harudin's ambition and what his dream really means for the incoming dawn of the world. Hi everyone, I'm Man on the Internet, and you may remember me from videos such as This Is Why Dragon Does Nothing, where we calculated all of Dragon's on-screen appearances in One Piece and determined that his do-nothing rate was over 80%, and 12 Things You'll Wish You Never Knew About One Piece, a video which got demonetized due to the art of St. Charles I used in the thumbnail. But today I'm here to speak about something far more important than nudes of a world noble, because Harudin is rapidly becoming one of the most unexpectedly important characters in One Piece, following a path of slow graduation from Corridor Coliseum fodder to Muck Vice Puncher to Straw Hat Grand Fleet member to son of King Harold of Elbaph, and now very potentially holder of the coveted Will of D. So I don't know if this was Oda's intention from the beginning, but Harudin is getting more and more Luffy-like. Right from the get-go on Dressrosa, he did state that he wanted to become the king of the giants, and the way he recruited Road is very similar to the way that Luffy recruited most of his crew. Harudin saw Road doing a lovely drawing, thought that it was pretty cool, and said, "Let's be friends, weirdo." With Road even having the same sort of motivation to make Harudin the king of the giants as Zoro has to make Luffy the king of the pirates. Although Zoro described Road's ambition as, quote, kinda boring. And in chapter 1137, Harudin is even raising his mug and exclaiming his dream in the same way that Luffy does, as if Harudin's posing for the first volume cover of his own fictional giant pirate manga. But something that goes very unnoticed about Harudin is that he's an oddity, and it's obvious just from his name, because the vast majority of Elbaph giants are named after wrestlers and have been since the very beginning. Dory and Broggy are named after Dory Funk and Bruiser Brody, which is why Broggy's weapon is called the Bruiser Axe, and Dory's sword is named the Terry Sword after Dory Funk's brother Terry. Stanson is Stan Hansen, Goldberg is Bill Goldberg, Ripley is a bit of a more modern one, being Rhea Ripley, Road comes from the Road Warriors, and even Colin is named after a wrestler, or indeed wrestlers plural, because there's a whole dynasty of Collins or whatever they are. And this even extends to giants that you've probably forgotten or perhaps never even knew existed, like Harudin's martial arts instructor Radin, named after James Radin, and he was seen during Little Garden as part of the giant warrior pirates serving under Dory and Broggy. Now, other non-wrestling based giants do exist, but their names are inspired by Norse mythology. There's the obvious in Loki, but Gerd takes her name from Gero, a Norse goddess. And then, out of nowhere, we have Harudin, who doesn't fit into either naming scheme. Harudin's namesake comes from Hayreddin Barbarossa, a former admiral of the Ottoman Navy, who was actually the younger brother of Urutres, who was the partial inspiration for Mad Monk of Rouge. But whilst not immediately obvious to us, Harudin at his core clashes with the traditional Norse wrestling culture of Elbaph. And that makes all the sense in the world, because we now know that Harudin's mother was not from Elbaph and was in fact from another giant kingdom whose culture probably consisted of old Ottoman names and some other non-wrestling gimmick. But there is some meta context to add here, because Harudin was introduced during Dressrosa, and around this time I suspect that Oda was doing a bit of an Ottoman deep dive, because you also have Colosseum characters like Lepanto, named after the Battle of Lepanto, and of course Suleiman, named after the longest reigning Ottoman Sultan. So there's a definite theme of what Oda appeared to be interested in at the time, and that works for throwaway characters who just need a name. But why do it for Harudin, who came from a society with an already established naming scheme? And combining that with the fact that one of the very first things Harudin said was his dream to become the king of the giants, I have to imagine that Oda already had a very strong idea for Harudin in mind, which doesn't always happen. A lot of times characters are introduced and more or less improvised into prominence, but we've also met a handful of other giants who do not have Elbaphian heritage, and their names tend to have distinctly European yet not Scandinavian influence. San Juan Wolf is a wonderful example of this. San Juan is of course the capital of Puerto Rico, but also the name of one of Japan's first Western-style sailing ships, the San Juan Bautista, meaning St. John the Baptist. And San Juan Wolf was born in West Blue, the same sea that Morley was born in, and comparing the two of them, they appear to be members of a more rotund giant civilization with very small eyes right at the center of their faces. However, Morley isn't named after anything specifically European. He's named after the Japanese word mori, meaning spear. However, his favorite food is a bagna calda, which is an Italian dish. So Harudin's mother could have been from this kingdom in West Blue, but right now I'm looking towards South Blue, to wherever Jaguar D Saul is from. And this is because Saul has something of an odd connection to Haradin. Remember that during Robin's flashback, Saul was very clear about not wanting to be associated with what he described as the savage culture of Elbaph. And yet, after the Buster Call wiped out O'Hara, Saul enlisted Haradin and the new giant warrior pirates to assist in salvaging all of the books that were saved. And Dragon even goes on to describe Saul as being their, quote, captain. So there's a large degree of trust between Saul and Haradin, emanating from some sort of history that still has yet to be explained at the time of this recording. But what I would put forward is that Haradin's mother was from Saul's giant kingdom in South Blue, and if we wanted to go super conspiracy theory, then we could even pose the idea that Haradin's mother was Saul's sister, and so Haradin is Saul's nephew. And so when the O'Hara incident happened, Saul knew that there was at least one person he could trust, his own family, which is a very appealing idea to me because Saul has said that every member of his family carried the same initial D that he has, which would make Haradin the inheritor of the Will of D, which would go on to perfectly explain his similarities to Luffy and the other members of the D clan that we've encountered. And also, here's a connection that probably means absolutely nothing, but it is still there. Haradin's inspiration, Hayreddin Barbarossa. The Barbarossa part of that name is an epithet meaning red beard, and Saul's primary aesthetic trait is his big, bushy red beard. I'm not going to push that too much or at all. In fact, forget that you heard it, because you can find weird connections like that everywhere in a series as big and as long as One Piece, but I'm personally not going to ignore it entirely because there's a maybe floating around here. At the very least, at some stage, Oda is going to have to explore this family of giants who inherited the Will of D. I really don't think that we're going to end this series without fleshing out this lineage, and having Haradin be the modern generation of them would be a very convenient and story-relevant way to do so. And here's another thing really fun about Haradin that I think's gone a bit unnoticed. It's been hidden by the giant shroud that is Loki. When the giants were briefly going over Loki's childhood, they stated a prophecy that occurred before Loki's birth. And this prophecy stated that King Harold would be killed by his own son. And no other specifics are mentioned, but after Loki's birth, the assumption was made that it would be him, given all of the other terrible, bad alleged things that happened simply due to Loki's existence. But me, right, I see the word son and I think, that's a bit ambiguous and easily abusable for a fun plot twist. Granted, it takes a lot of mental gymnastics to somehow get Haradin involved at Harold's death at this stage, but I just want to politely leave that on the table as a point of intrigue, because the prophecy said that a son of Harold would kill the Harold, and Haradin is one of 2 confirmed people who meet that qualification, so we should not ignore him. And also on that, we don't really have a solid idea about how Haradin feels about Loki. We've been told by Road that Harold's death hit Haradin the hardest, and that he has the, quote, most cause to hate Loki for his actions. But simply having the most cause does not mean that Haradin actually does hate Loki. If anything, it makes Haradin sound very forgiving. Like, yeah, he had the most cause to hate Loki, and yet he feels not that. I wonder why. Perhaps it's because the prophecy came true and Haradin was the one responsible for killing Harold, either accidentally or because Harold may have been a very, very bad kingman. But this is information that could never become public because Haradin was already considered to have, quote, tainted blood. So having him be the one who killed the beloved King Harold would only cement Haradin as an enemy of Elbaph, much like Charlotte Linlin after she killed Yorl. But knowing that Haradin had the best interest of Elbaph in mind and would go on to become a great leader, Loki took the blame so that Haradin could unite all of giant kind and make that dream come true. And also just on this, there's a very curious event that happened during Egghead Island on Elbaph that we haven't explored yet. In chapter 1130, it was said that Haradin wanted to come to Egghead Island to help Luffy, but there was trouble happening on Elbaph, which is then implied to be Loki related. Not directly stated, but heavily implied. But then when we get to Elbaph, nothing. We arrive, Loki's still chained up, and Loki even said that he's been there for 6 years at that point, and Haradin's off elsewhere happily hunting a moose. So what happened here? The answer is I don't know. I suppose the implication may be that Haradin needed to stay on Elbaph just in case to guard Loki whilst the giant warrior pirates were away, because it was said that it took the combined strength of every giant warrior to subdue Loki after his sentence. But then again, if that were the case, then Haradin staying behind is practically pointless anyway, because most of the warriors have left for Egghead. What's Haradin gonna do? And it also makes actions like sailing to Dressrosa a bit questionable, because if Loki escaped during that time, then a missing Haradin would mean that they wouldn't have the strength needed to deal would Loki either. So I don't know, it's just an interesting question that I'd maybe like answered. And I'd also really like to explore the relationship between King Harold and Haradin, because at the moment, on paper, they seem to have fairly opposing ideals. Haradin actually appears to follow more in Elbaph tradition than he does in Harold's beliefs of tranquil peace, as during Big Mom's flashback, we saw an 18-year-old Haradin being trained in the village, both physically and mentally, with Radin telling him, either Chief Dory or Chief Broggy will return and revive the giant pirate crew. You are a warrior. You've got to discipline yourself, Haradin. And at this time, and probably even still to this very day, Haradin also idolized Yorl and Jarl, calling them the most respected warriors of giant kind. Now, this was likely before Harold's aggressive transition to peace took place, but even then, Haradin has still carried on the traditions of Elbaph. And I think there's an increased pressure on him in particular to do so. As someone born on the island but still considered a foreign entity, it's like Haradin has to overcompensate to prove that he is worthy of being considered a warrior of Elbaph. To make up for his allegedly tainted blood, he needs to embody the traditions of Elbaph that much more potently, which sounds like it would potentially conflict with Harold's ideals for Elbaph. You've got this king who wants to take a very sharp turn away from everything that Elbaph has ever known and embrace all of this peace. But then at the same time, Haradin, his only son, was determined to become an avatar of Elbaph history and culture. It just seems like there's a clash of ideals happening between father and son there that could have led to some sort of fight and subsequent fulfillment of some prophecy. But more relevantly for this video, it's another similarity to Luffy, who's connected to several in-world prophecies at this stage, one of which being Kozuki Oden's prediction of the figures who will cause the Great War, which I guess we're now calling the Third Great War after Robin read the funky sacred text. But also Madame Charlie's prophecy that Luffy will destroy Fishman Island, which sounds bad, but apparently destroying the world is a very sun god thing to do, so maybe it's not so bad. Putting the specifics of the prophecy to one side, Haradin is a man entwined with an enhanced degree of fate, at least compared to most other characters, which is traditionally an indicator of a big old D. And in this way, you can almost see a classic One Piece twist incoming when it turns out that Haradin knew Loki was innocent all along and playing into the act for some well-written reason that I can't conjure because I am not a world-class author, but I'm thinking something along the lines of Nami in her village, with the twist that everyone knew what Nami was doing, but they were playing along because they didn't want Nami to feel bound to the village. They wanted to give her the opportunity to escape and live a decent life if she so desired. Whereas Loki's kind of the opposite. Haradin would be lying to keep him bound. And at the moment, Haradin really has only shown one Loki-related emotion, which is when Luffy was talking to Jarl and asked if Loki was a good guy, to which Haradin comically yelled, "Absolutely not," along with the rest of the giants in the area, which is evidence for the much simpler explanation that Haradin just doesn't know anything about what happened with the Harold situation, but also all of the other things that I just said. Because if Haradin doesn't know it, then he is going to find out the truth eventually, which will either cement Loki as a major antagonist or as a major ally. At the moment, I'm personally favoring the latter, and a big part of that is the theme of duality that Elbaph is currently running with. Since the very beginning when we met Dory and Broggy, the co-captains of the giant warrior pirates, to any slobby with Oimo and Kashi, to Big Mom's flashback where we met the former co-captains Yorl and Jarl, and even with Haradin and Loki, as well as the arrival of Shanks' twin brother Shamrock, we've got a very strong, enduring motif of brotherhood. If Elbaph was a sport, it would not be played alone. Elbaph is only a doubles tournament. And one way this arc could end would be with Haradin and Loki coming together and inheriting the mantle of becoming the next co-captains of the giant warrior pirates, in order to continue that proud legacy of Elbaph that both Loki and Haradin seem to believe in. Haradin wants to become king of the giants. He also wants to unite all of the giant tribes all over the world. However, this very, very greedy giant man also wants to carry on the legacy of the giant warrior pirates, which is why he founded the very creatively named New Giant Warrior Pirates in the first place, and which is why, even though Haradin is set to almost certainly become the next king of Elbaph, I don't think he'll be a stationary monarch like Vivi, Momonosuke, and all of the other people, and there's two main reasons why. The first is that he, by nature, is going to have to do a lot of traveling to fulfill his dream of uniting all of the giant kingdoms, and he can't just do that with your butt parked on a throne. But the second is that Haradin has already pledged himself as a founding member of the Straw Hat Grand Fleet, and Haradin doesn't seem like the kind of man who's going to abandon that pledge, especially after it becomes pretty damn clear that Luffy is this generation's incarnation of the sun god. And if anything, I see Haradin as as a semi-straw hat, because he has this wildly ambitious dream, but in order to make that dream a reality, he first needs Luffy to achieve his dream first. And once the barriers are broken down across the world as a result of its third destruction and rebirth, that would be the perfect opportunity to reach out to all of the other giant kingdoms and to propose a union and support each other in building a new age of very, very large prosperity.